you just can't predict how a patient is going to be doing. If they're complaining of a lot of pain, it is because their brain is swelling and they're in a lot of pain. So they're not trying to be uncooperative. They're not trying to, to get out of not doing the testing. They just really don't feel well at all, and for very good reasons. So this is something we've just started doing in the epilepsy monitoring unit. We're putting up laminated signs, and this is mostly to remind nursing staff and people who are like physicians who are going through and seeing the patients. But the things that you guys want to be reminded of, and if all of a sudden you start to see a seizure and you're like, what am I supposed to do? So you want to press the seizure button, you want to press the nursing call bell if there's no response, and then the rest of the things on this list, you should see that the nursing staff or someone is entering the room and doing all these other steps involved. But if you need a reminder, there's the seizure assessment. The other piece, number 3, is also the very helpful thing, because sometimes when you guys are doing testing, you might be between the patient and the cameras. So these are what the cameras look like. One of them, so the patient's in the bed, the TV is facing the patient, and there's a camera that's mounted in front of the TV. So at the foot of the bed, that's where you don't want to be, because the foot of the bed will block the camera from seeing the patient. The other place that the camera is, there's a second one by the window. So it's shooting the patient from one side or the other. It's opposite the door, and so you want to make sure that you've stood, after you push the button, that you stand away from where that camera is, so both cameras can capture the patient and what they're doing. And then these are the questions that you guys had about the buttons. So that's what the push button looks like, the one on the left. It's usually a gray button. Typically where you'll see it is that if the patient's in the bed, it might be lying next to the patient in the bed. It could be wrapped up against the bed rails where the patient can reach it. If they're in the chair, then it should be over with the patient by the chair. If it's not, you're welcome to make sure that it gets to where the patient is before you start doing your testing. I know in some cases you prefer the patient to be in the bed or the chair for the testing. Make sure the nursing staff helps you get them from where they need to be for the testing itself. We are fine with our patients being in the chair during testing. In fact, we're encouraging them because that also helps with the swelling. So the more they're sitting up, the more the swelling is actually getting out of their head, and so they're more likely to not be experiencing pain as much and to be able to tolerate the procedure. And then on the right side is the nursing call bell. So that little nurse at the top with the big red button, that is what you push. So if the left doesn't work and no nurse comes in, because you know the distance between the control room and the room, that's how long it should be between, for them to get to you guys. Or if they're in another room, they should come on over. If that's not happening, you can go ahead and push the red button. If you're really nervous, then just push one and the other. That's okay too. Again, we would rather people know than not know what's going on. We have also, so our faculty that go through the epilepsy monitoring unit do want to meet you guys. I mean, they want to know who you are, they want to know who's going in and testing the patient. So we have a sign-up sheet now. I've circulated it to all the PIs to make sure that they're comfortable with doing this. So what we'll have is up where the patients are going, up in the control room, we'll have a sign-up sheet that you guys can just put your name, email address, what the date is, the time that you're entering the room, and the time that you're exiting the room. So when we tell patients, when we counsel them about how long the testing takes, the testing itself might take 5 minutes, but the setup takes an hour and the takedown takes 30 minutes. So you really want to let them know about all of these things. You want them to be prepared, and you want family to be prepared, because otherwise they're going to keep poking their head in and asking you what's going on. To the best of your ability, tell them how long the whole testing time is going to take, and then write down what experiment you're doing and who your PI is, so that we can just keep track of who's coming in when. Typically the surgery is on a Wednesday or a Thursday. The patient gets observed in the NCCU and then comes into the monitoring unit Thursday or Friday. So usually we're here on the weekends doing the majority of the testing. But again, this is also when patients are going to feel like crap. I mean, they're going to want to be left alone, so we just have to think about that and see how they're doing. I've proposed that we not start testing before 8:30 in the morning and that we quit by 7 p.m. because I know that there have been circumstances where that has not been the case. I would prefer that you not wake a patient up to do testing. If just remember, if they're going on rounds, they're going to wake the patient up. You're not going to want to disrupt rounds anyway, so if a patient is sleeping in, you can hang out, and then once rounds have happened, you can go in and ask them. I haven't seen anybody go in and wake the patient up in the morning, so that's fine. And then cortical stimulation mapping is typically done on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesdays from 10 a.m. to noon and from 2 p.m. to 4. That's a little bit flexible because we need that information. So for instance, somebody who has seizures that come from the dominant temporal lobe, we need to know where their language areas are so that we know for surgery what we need to take out and what we're not going to take out. So that mapping testing takes precedence over everything else. That absolutely needs to happen. And if patients are still comfortable and if they're willing after the testing, that's fine. But we just need to know that those periods of time are dedicated to that. And so that's why we're just going to kind of keep track of when patients are coming in and out. You mentioned about the door. So the reason I would prefer people to push the button rather than going to the nurse is because this is just something very peculiar to our emu. We are in a Faraday cage. So if you guys have noticed the space doors where you like open it and close it and it's making that bizarre sucking noise, that's because it's a part of the Faraday cage. In the very unusual event that a helicopter is landing on the top of the emu, that's why we're in a Faraday cage, is to keep the interference from the helicopter from interfering with our signals. But if you were to go and open the door right when that's happening, the seizure that we're trying to record, we may not get to see. This has never happened because if you think of the probability of that happening, it's very low, but that's why we'd rather you push the button, let the nursing staff open the door and come in to come see the patient. But and for the same reason, when you're bringing all of your equipment in and out, just make sure between each time, try to get through that door as quickly as you can, close that door again. If you hear a helicopter overhead, then please don't open the door. Just wait until the helicopter lands and then go ahead and go in. Because that theoretically, that's why that's there and it could disrupt the signal. Practice your setup and your takedown so that when you're in the room, that takes as short of a period of time as possible, because the patient's perception is that that is the amount of time that it's taken to do the testing. Again, even if the testing was 5 minutes, they're going to think, oh gosh, there was somebody in my room for 3 hours. They were there the whole time. And so you want to try to have that be as efficient as you can. These research studies are all voluntary. Again, these patients feel like crap. They want to be left alone. So they need to know and be reminded that it's voluntary. They should have built-in breaks so that they feel rested, and it's everyone's advantage that they get those breaks, because the longer they're willing to participate, the better. But they do need breaks. If a family member comes in and wants to visit with them, move out of